She decided to branch out on her own as an independent paranormal investigator, and Access Paranormal was born. Beth's an international author and podcaster. As well as being a qualified trainer and assessor, she's studied with the Ryan Institute School of Parapsychology and is a member of the Big Three, ASSAP, SPR, Ghost Club. So with that in mind, can we all give a warm welcome? I know she can't hear us clapping, but you can clap anyway at home. To Beth. Thank you.
Thank you. Fabulous. Thank you, everybody. So excited to be first cab off the rank for this fabulous online conference here. The series session is going to be a lot of information to get through in a short period of time. So I'm going to be fairly quick. So pen and paper at the ready. And again, I'm happy for questions afterwards if there's enough time, fingers crossed. But yes, so debunking and PAEs. As you can see on the screen, what is a PAE? Originally, I had given a talk to the UFO Society in Sydney about 5 years ago. It was about a different type of topic with mental illness and paranormal experiences, you know, the light and fluffy. And I was talking about debunking a fair bit. And the interesting thing about that is, I mean, halfway through, you know, people sort of sitting there and quite stern, and they're looking, and I thought, oh, tough audience. Didn't realize that the word debunking was quite offensive to a lot of people in the UFO community. And I thought, well, you know, why is that? And obviously they explained how cynical skeptics in the past have really used that word, because to debunk is bunko, meaning there's fraudulent intention behind it. I thought, well, a lot of people in the paranormal who consider themselves as paranormal investigators use this term quite frequently, but it doesn't mean that there's been fraudulent intent with something that's occurred. So I thought there's got to be another term that has to be something that we can use. So I've come up with PAE, which is possible alternative explanations. I know, so ingenious. So I use PAEs a lot more as a way to actually say instead of debunking, because I think it's a lot more of a accurate representation. So that's what that is. In this session, it's also known as the Party Paranormal Pooper session. So I'm going to be looking at phenomena that can actually possibly be paranormal when someone experiences it, but really there's another explanation for it. So obviously a little bit about me already has been spoken about, but I run a website called accessparanormal.com. I founded it in 2011, 10 years active experience. I consider myself an independent paranormal investigator, so I work alongside other teams and groups, and I find that really fits. I have been in a part of a team for about 1.5 years, and I got a lot of great experience, but I feel being independent is kind of my thing. And I specialize in online education for paranormal investigators all around the world. Very passionate about that. When you live in Australia for so long and you're away from where the rest of the world is, to be able to access this information like we're doing today in this great conference. So this is what we're going to be going through in this session. Most common things to debunk or find your possible alternative explanation while investigating. So we're looking at false REM readings, confirmation bias. We'll be looking at the O word, effects of high EMF, cryptonesia, idiomotor or ideomotor effect, however you wish to pronounce that, infrasound, carbon monoxide, and audible and visual pareidolia. So some of those terms people may have actually heard of, some may not. So this is going to be a really cool session. Okay, so we're going to look at what each of these particular phenomena is, how it affects paranormal investigating, and then the third part of it will be, well, what do you do about actually detecting it and how to find it and really investigate it? So we're looking at false REM readings. What is it? For those of us who know, this is a REM pod. There is actually an antenna that you can't sort of be cut off really there, not the best picture. But it radiates an electromagnetic field around it. Once something comes towards it, it starts to alarm. So it's a field that's constantly running. You know, and it's the detecting, you know, so obviously that's the theory of, you know, REM, EMF, that kind of side of it. Of course, how does it affect paranormal investigating if you're using one of those and it starts to sound off? What would be something that's not paranormal that could be making this equipment sound off? Car keys, believe it or not, the ones with the remote. So if you're opening your car from afar, it will send a signal that actually interacts with them. Obviously power lines as well. Radios too, a huge annoyance, because a lot of paranormal groups will, particularly large groups, will be using walkie-talkies, and they'll be able to, you know, they'll sort of radio to one another. And the one clue to this is, and we'll go into the next slide, is that all the REM pods will light up at the same time. So that's when you know that's obviously something more explainable, which is here. Also, how to detect it as well. Keep in mind the environment that you're in. So if you're having it sounding off, it's more than likely could be power lines in the ground. I was investigating Sydney quarantine station, and we were walking through from one location to another, and our equipment was sounding off. I thought this was quite interesting, and we followed it. And of course, I'm often looking above thinking, oh, it could be power lines, but it was actually what was in the ground. So it was another thing to keep in mind. There you can see an electric box there. They're the bane of all our existence when it comes to possible paranormal phenomena. Obviously, every house has one, but some of them could be older and they can be quite reactive with equipment. So obviously people using their equipment to detect where that actually sits, and obviously making a note before doing any more further investigating. And of course, we've got our mobile phones and devices of that sort of side. As you may, if you've been to paranormal events or investigating, a lot of time you'll hear people say, look, can you switch your phones off? It's not that we want to make sure that no one can hear you scream and you can get out, but it's actually due to the fact that, the radio waves that your phone's constantly sending a signal out, and it will interfere with the equipment. Even if you probably put it on flight mode, apparently they're still very low, but still a chance. So it's always good to actually switch them off. Plus you save your battery power as well. Trust me on that one. Now this is a video, but my computer's audio is really not so great, the G-rated version. So I won't actually play this, and I'll actually explain what it is. So there's confirmation bias, which is something that everybody just in general should be aware about. When it comes to investigating, your confirmation bias when you go into a location, and often will go in there because it has reports of possible paranormal phenomena. So already we're walking in thinking, oh, this place could actually be haunted. Keeping that in mind, that will actually skew any experience or thoughts that you have with anything that happens is really, really vital. It's just being aware. We can't help it. We're adults. We're people. We're built to survive in this particular way. But just being aware of confirmation bias is really, really potent. So how does it affect paranormal investigating? Anxious people are very susceptible to confirmation bias. If it's a client you're dealing with and they have been taunted in the past by others and always worried that people don't like them, they could be very biased to the fact that they may have a demonic entity in their home. Now, we're just hypothetical here. Having dealt with years of negativity from people, they would actively find ways to confirm paranormal activity as being negative too. So that's the other side of it as well. So how do you detect it? How do you find your possible explanation for it? By being aware of it, as I mentioned, just being aware that you've already kind of going into a situation with an idea of what it is. And it's hard. It's really hard. And also for yourself, as in general, actively find people and information that is different to your own opinion. This will help give you some more rounded way of looking at situations and will help, with making better decisions. So a side note to that, to be able to do this is a sign of confidence, to openly source for information that goes against your own beliefs. Now, there's been some information I've read from different skeptics around the world. Sharon Hill's information I find is very difficult sometimes to read. It's really like eating a lemon, and a really sour one that hasn't even ripened yet. But I will read it and I will absorb it because it goes sometimes, even if the way in which it's written may not be what I would agree with, the information is still pertinent and still valuable for me to actually learn about. Oh, the O word. We couldn't go past this presentation without the O word. Orbs. Very, very hotly contested in social media with lots of paranormal investigators and people who consider themselves ghost hunters as well. The big fight generally is the fact that a lot of people believe in them and a lot of people don't. Again, it's very hotly contested. Can spirit turn up in a circle and float around? Who knows? But we're still figuring out whether or not that can be the case. A great picture there on the left, I think, is really good too, because orbs can also be known as bugs and insects in Australia. Again, as I say, I'm surprised I'm still here, snakes and spiders and all that. But yes, insects also can represent as being a particular orb. Again, all different shapes there as well. And of course, that's a picture of a particular tunnel in Australia as well, where it was a very, as you can see, there's even mold on the top of the actual tunnel. So you're gathering it could be moisture, it could be dust, or it could be both. So that's generally how they show up on camera screens. Just going to take a sip of water. Oh, my wonderful cup, which is Prospect Place, by the way. I love this cup. It's in Trinway, Ohio, and it's very haunted. Okay. So orbs, how does it affect paranormal investigating? take a look. It's annoying. That's how it affects it. People can feel that they've captured something that could be possibly spiritual, maybe, but 99.99% of the time when we look at it, it isn't. It is literally just light reflections. So dust particles can reflect light, and they can give the impression that they glow in the dark. Dust is usually made up of dirt, pollen, grains from flowers, and spores made up of mold and other fungi. Ew. So as you can see, some of these can reflect light when they have a flash light shone upon them. And you'll get that sometimes. Some people say, oh, but look, it's got a light source. And yeah, that's because it's reflection. That's why it's glowing. So it's an uphill battle, but we've just got to keep at it, people. So how does it affect also? Lens flare is another one where people will see orbs turning up in photos. And it's another phenomenon that can appear on your camera and look like an orb. So lens flare can be bigger than the 1/10 of the frame size and is caused by a bright light source either in the frame or the shot you're about to take, or the light source is just outside it. But for the lens flare, the source of light needs to be in front of the camera. So this light enters the camera lens, it bounces around internally, reflecting from its optical surfaces from within the camera. What does this mean if you have lens flare and it has a color to it? Because often people say, oh, the orb, it was green, it was purple. Well, your camera has an anti-flare lens coating and can change the color of the reflection. Now, from memory, I think the reflection color is generally green, I think it is. So you'll see a lot of people talking about, oh, it's a green orb. And yeah, that's the reason why. So that's why they come in different colors. Okay, this is a video that you don't need audio for. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play it and have a look and see. Someone has captured this sorry, I should say recorded this. Capture gives a positive connotation. So someone has recorded this and believes it to be an orb, and it's in a location called Waverly Hills Sanatorium. You'll see it soon. So, interesting thoughts. Do you think it could be an orb? The way, I mean, it's not moving in a traditional way. It's got floating, it's changing in form. It's not an orb. That's not an orb. It's not a spirit orb or anything. I'm lucky enough to have investigated this location, and it's a sanatorium for starters. So there's lots of windows, lots of air coming through, because obviously having fresh air in these particular locations was built for this. So lots of airflow. I also know that they use the downstairs for Halloween sort of festivities and events. So there could be lots of debris around after they've packed up, like bits of string or leftover bits of dust and sort of paper around. So for me, I would think that's a piece of string. Of course, it's reflecting. And I mean, your camera is in night vision. It's struggling to see light as it is. So already it's going to pick up anything and amplify it as well. But again, a lot of people will believe that to possibly be something paranormal. So how do you detect it? Know your equipment, people. Get to understand the equipment that you're using to visually visually record anything. So that's video as well as your still cameras and understanding the light spectrums and how it all works. That's the only way you can actually find your possible alternative explanations. Okay, effects of high MF. It's everywhere. High MF is everywhere. It's naturally in your home, it's naturally in the environment, which we'll go into a little bit. But that gives you a little bit of an idea of the different type of frequencies, and also in all different appliances. Obviously, the older the appliance, the more chance it's going to have a level of EMF emitted from it at some point. So how does this affect paranormal investigating? Like, so what? So high MF, just buy a new kettle. Well, some people can be more prone to EMF even in the most normal of levels. This condition is called electrosensitivity and means a person can experience discomfort and even serious health problems if exposed to EMF. So exposure to high EMF can cause people to feel nervous and other symptoms like fatigue, stress, sleep disturbances, skin symptoms like prickling or burning sensations and rashes, We've got body symptoms like pains and aches in your muscles, eye symptoms such as burning sensations and foggy thinking, as well as depression. So when you start to think, okay, if you're investigating a possible case or a location that has people experiencing this, then one thing to think about, maybe it could be high levels of EMF. Now, electrosensitive people, the science field is really doesn't really believe in that as being a thing. I personally think there's the possibility of people being more sensitive to EMF than others. I've noticed myself over the years, when I've gone into a basement, I do feel a little bit more of the creepy, and I know it's not because of the environment. It's more to do with actual, when we've done EMF level checks, that the EMF levels are, they're not milligauss, they're up decent numbers. And also when I step next to my microwave as well, I kind of feel a bit weird. It just feels uncomfortable and I kind of step away from it. So again, it could be my confirmation bias, but I have to be careful. Okay, less common symptoms can be ear, nose, and throat symptoms, and digestive disorders and infertility. And in utter extreme cases, and I mean extreme, leukemia in children, breast cancer, or cancer clusters that have been linked to high exposure to EMF. So how do we detect this? How do we find out a plausible explanation? Look for high levels of EMF where people say they are experiencing the same symptoms. There was a case about 5-6 years ago I was involved with, where someone said they had trouble sleeping, they felt depressed, they felt anxious. We used our equipment at the time to detect levels of EMF, and there was exceedingly high, I think it was around about 30 to 35, not milligauss, near this particular old radio clock right next to their bed. Took the radio clock away, moved the bed around, and they had the most amazing sleep ever since. And it was like, wow, if it was just as simple as that with most things. But again, it's knowing where to look for, knowing and understanding people's symptoms and what could actually be causing it. Cryptomnesia, what is it? This is a tricky one. The term cryptomnesia comes from crypto, hidden, and nesia, memories. Hidden memory is remembering things you've forgotten before, not like something where you just kind of put your car keys down if you've lost them, but something that is known in neuroscience as latent memory. So when things occur in our lives, we forget those experiences soon after the event, but we retain bits of the event, or as in neuroscience calls it, latent memories. Because imagine if you just remembered everything all the time, overload. These can be recalled if we think about something that is associated with it, like something you can see or smell. How many times do you get a memory so quickly if you smell someone's perfume, or there's a certain fragrance that brings back a memory quicker than you would ever have thought of? Now, if we were to remember everything all the time, like watching a movie, there would be some serious information overload. These memories are also subject to our own influences over time, like how we perceive and justify ourselves. And we can start to change slightly over time to what we believe happened instead. So we're built to survive. We're not completely robust. These things can and do happen. So how does this, what has this got to do with investigating possible paranormal phenomena? Well, if you're looking at investigating possible cases of mediumship and psi, most of our long-term memory is an important emotional moments. Psychics tend to give information that are emotionally important. Maybe this emotional information triggers their own hidden memories, which may make them think their information is from spirit. Now, again, we're hypothetically thinking about this. Or if they may read of a death in a section of a newspaper, heard someone talk about it, or is seen in TV and later is recalling this information. And also think of reincarnation. Could this be a possible explanation to why people may feel they have reincarnation throwbacks, memories? Oh my gosh, I feel like I was in the Egypt pharaoh times. It's just a thought, an idea, and a possible explanation. So how do we detect it? Very, very, very interestingly, cryptomnesia is something that can happen more likely when you're stressed and reading or searching for information. So your ability on what information you're obtaining and where is actually less. Now, this is something to keep in mind when dealing with people who claim to be mediums. Now, how would you handle cryptomnesia? If someone is retelling a story of their past life, research into the details of that person's recount. But as with cryptomnesia, it can be difficult to prove if the person hasn't found this information first. That's the hardest part. Or there's another way you can debunk cryptomnesia. Provide information or part of information as inaccurate and see if that is something that was retold at a later date It's a far-fetched idea, but if you want to give it a shot, let me know. Again, it's tricky to debunk or 100% say someone has had a cryptomnesia event, but being aware that this can happen greatly helps with paranormal investigating. The ideomotor effect or idiomotor effect depends what side of the Pacific you sit on. What is it? If we wanted to pick up a piece of paper or get up from a chair, we wouldn't think about it first. It's something that is, it's like it's conscious decision. We think, okay, I just want to get up and go and do it. And that is called volition. But we can also do things subconsciously, and that is known as without volition. Now, 3 categories of unconscious actions with or without volition. So exitomotor. Have a water, Beth. Have a water. My sexy haunted cup. And that's things that are unconsciously that we do that keeps us alive, like breathing, swallowing, drinking. We don't have to think about remembering to swallow or when we eat, of course. So it's an unconscious thing that we do every day. Sensory motor. This is a type of thing that we do when we react to fright or from a scary movie, or if you feel pain, or if you touch hot water, you instantly pull your hand away as a reflected action, reflection. Idiomotor or ideomotor, this is when a person's unconsciously moves because of an expectation or a suggestion. It can be the tiniest motor movement and the person has no idea they're doing it. They often feel as though someone else is moving an object that they are in contact with, or in the paranormal, it could be considered what is another entity. So the effects that this has in paranormal investigating, apart from people unconsciously shuffling their feet and going, oh no, that wasn't me, it's so annoying. Some people use dowsing rods to find water and claim it to be very effective. But some paranormal investigators use dowsing rods to find spirits in a room or outside a room, outside location. So dowsing rods usually start with both rods out in front. As the person moves around the room, they're meant to cross over each other as a positive sign or point in the direction of an apparent spirit. Now, if this person is already in a place that is deemed to be haunted, remember, we've got confirmation bias happening here, they will unconsciously move the rods in a direction they feel most apprehensive of. And again, it's not from a place of fraudulent. It's not saying I want to deceive people and make them think there's a spirit. This is something that is unconscious that they're doing through their belief system and their body. So how does this affect, of course, paranormal investigating? The idiomotor effect is also something considered with Ouija boards, psychic boards, and glass divination. I've used Ouija boards more times than I have hands and toes and never had a problem. Just putting it out there. When using these tools for attempted communication with the spirit world, we are already waiting and wanting something paranormal to occur. Again, you've got that confirmation bias, you've got the idiomotor effect probably kicking in. Obviously, your heart's racing, you're thinking, is something going to happen? Your hand can guide the planchette or glass on the table to point to letters in a desired direction in response. Usually, the movement of the object in certain parts of the table or board can't be replicated in the same way. This can further enhance a person's belief that this could be paranormal. Because how many times when we think, well, is there a pattern happening with this particular phenomenon or occurrence? Oh, if there is a pattern, maybe it's more than likely something to be naturally explained. But if it's sporadic and sort of higgledy-piggledy, if you call it, I'm losing my words, if it's sporadic and spontaneous, that's it, spontaneous. People would more lean towards the possibility of it being paranormal, but the idiomotor effect can also further enhance that because it isn't something that is a regular pattern. It's not something that's going to be consistent. All right. And there's another one. So how do you detect it? How do you detect this? If you want to start using Ouija boards and glassware, do it so if you feel comfortable. But if you want to do, so one part of it as well is if you ask more about what's happening in a person's life around that time. So it's the first thing you do. Stress can do a lot to a person's physical well-being, and sometimes focusing on that could possibly be paranormal, could be easier to live with and face than some more difficult situations in a person's life. And also find out who else was there and what do they think. They could also be not helping with the situation by also believing something paranormal is happening when it may not be. So if you want to explore using a Ouija board or an upturned glass, but wanting to eliminate the possibility of an idiomotor effect, Run the experiment by blindfolding people at the table with their fingers on the planchette and have a person stand outside the circle asking the question. So, and there's other people that can even go an extra, step more as far as like removing more sort of possible outside triggers. But start with that if that's something that you want to start getting into. There are generally 4 ranges of sound. We've got subsonic, infrasonic, audio spectrum, and ultrasonic, because we're talking about infrasound here. What actually is it? Infrasound is a sound that is below 20 hertz and is below the level of human hearing. Elephants, whales are able to communicate through infrasound as well as travel long distances. Now, just because we can hear it doesn't mean we can actually feel it. It's something, we'll go into it. It's a very interesting thing. Again, it almost feels like when I was in Ukraine and in Chernobyl, it's like, radiation, you can't see it, you can't smell it, but it's there. It's almost like with infrasound is that same thing. It's there. Your body is aware of it, or you're aware of it, but you can't detect it through your usual senses. Okay, so what causes infrasound? We got storms, piping, the vibration piping. And we've got old appliances. So we've got elephants and whales don't just create infrasound. That was a bit interesting. But it can also create from ocean waves, storms, vibrating pipes, some older style fans as well, some diesel engines and wind turbines as well. Now this is an audio clip, but I'm not going to play it. Normally I would play this in a sort of a room with actual people in a room, flesh and blood. And it's interesting because a lot of people, again, start to feel a bit strange when they listen to it. They feel a bit apprehensive. And some people didn't at all. And again, I, of course, at the same time, I'm obviously, confirmation bias. Hey, listen to this, you might feel creepy. So I have to keep that in mind as well. But again, it's an interesting experiment. So how does this affect paranormal investigating? Just because we can't hear infrasound doesn't mean we can't feel it. And this alone does all sorts of things to our bodies. If infrasound can hit a certain strength and frequency, it has been known to vibrate our eyes, which distort our vision. Now, this could also be an explanation for someone witnessing an apparition. Some research suggests that it can actually distort the inner ear, causing disorientation. And I think I remember reading somewhere that even the military have been looking at ways to use infrasound to disarm people. I think there's certain levels where you literally, your bowels go. And I'm like, that's intense. So yes. Also, the low vibration causes the effects for the rest of our body. So we've got symptoms of infrasound can be headaches, nausea, bad dreams, sleep disorders, feelings of paranoia, depression, fear, anxiety, chest pressure. Now you start to look at that list and think, hang on, if someone was to come to you originally saying, I think my place is haunted, these are the symptoms I'm actually experiencing, you can understand, where the crossover is possibly when it comes to something paranormal. Infrasound isn't something we recognize hearing, and yet we are feeling it. Because you are physically feeling this, but not hearing it, your mind starts to try and find out what's happening. The longer this goes on for, the more the fear a person begins to feel, and of course the physical signs that come with that emotion. So you're feeling something, but you don't know where it's coming from, and your body starts to, obviously is built to survive, so your fear starts to really kick in. Your senses can be so heightened that it may exaggerate the slightest of sensations. So how do you debunk it? How do you find your possible alternative explanation? Are symptoms consistent with someone experiencing infrasound? So that's what the body can feel like it's going through. Okay, let's see if we can figure out what's going on. Is it infrasound, or could it be something else? And if infrasound, where would it actually be coming from? So you could also look at investing in an infrasonic sound meter. They range from, this is Aussie dollars 100. So we're looking at around about 100 quid to about 400-500 quid if you're looking at hiring one. If you're using one, try and use it at the most quiet time of the day or night, and the less windy of the day, the better. So it's got to be super, super quiet if you can use one. I dealt with a case 7-8 years ago now. A poor guy was ringing me up, and I feel really, really frightened in my home. I can feel somebody's here, but I live on my own. It's a 1-bedroom unit in a high-rise building in a place called the Gold Coast in Queensland, Australia. And he was, where his unit was actually facing, it was right on the beach, beautiful location, because he took pictures. Because I said, well, what can you show me pictures of your location? Straight away I knew it was infrasound, because obviously if you're in a very windy place and there's gaps, and there's obviously with particular materials. I said to him, you need to, we'll go into the next slide. But as soon as he realized that and was able to get it sorted, he was actually able to literally be okay in his home. And one of the questions I kept asking was, anyone else feeling the same when they go into your location? Yes. Do you feel the same when you go anywhere else? No. So it had to be location based. And then I was like, it has to be infrasound. And again, he's right near the beach. It's the ocean waves as well. So if the infrasound is coming from the environment, like the case I dealt with, and isn't able to be fixed soon, encourage the people living nearby to listen to music to break the constant sound. So that's the first thing I asked him to do, to see if that helped. Keep in mind that some people will be more susceptible to infrasound than others, and this can sometimes be attributed to age. So if it's a factory or a dam that is causing it, encourage the tenants to write to the council and have someone come in and conduct a thorough inspection of the location. So I asked him to get the council of the area to come in, and they said, it was high levels of infrasound. Saved him having to buy a device himself or anything like that. Give me a second. Okay. You're doing good, people. Carbon monoxide, what is it? It's a colorless, odorless, toxic, flammable gas formed by incomplete combustion of carbon. It has no smell, no taste, no sound. Neither people nor animals can tell when they are breathing it in, but it can be fatal. Now, that's one thing I found really interesting here by living in the UK, is that when I've looked at accommodation, it's got a list of facilities. I'm thinking, a swimming pool, tennis court, and blah, blah, heating. And then it's got carbon monoxide detector. I'm like, you just don't get that in Australia. I'm like, what? That's actually really kind of cool. So you just, again, obviously you don't really need to heat Australia as much as you do here in the UK. All right, how does it affect paranormal investigating? A person who is exposed to CO2 may notice that something is wrong, but they may not know where the symptoms are coming from. The person may feel as if they have the flu, but without a temperature. If several people in the same building have the same symptoms, they may have CO2 poisoning. Within a few hours of being exposed, a person may experience loss of balance, vision problems, memory problems. You've got eventual loss of consciousness. And if these symptoms are mild, there is a chance of full recovery. So again, we're looking at those symptoms. A lot of times people will sit there and go, memory loss, loss of balance, vision problems. Oh, you might have a spirit, affecting you in some way. Well, hang on, let's look at all avenues. Let's look at the possibility of carbon monoxide poisoning. Again, you guys are here, obviously here in the UK, are very, very good with that particular part, with a lot of locations already having detectors in place anyway. Now, if this happens, all cooking and heating appliances should be switched off, all windows open, and the local gas safety authorities should be notified. The longer the individual is exposed to CO2, the more severe the symptoms will become. So other symptoms to keep in mind as well is, even if it's months after inhaling it, could be confusion, memory problems, and coordination difficulties. So it's really important. But again, as I said, it's pretty covered here. So how do you detect it and find your PAE? Possible sources of CO2 gas can be found in household appliances, such as you've got gas fires, boilers, central heating systems, water heaters, cookers, anything that warms up, basically, anything that's going to keep your place warm or heat something up. Running a car engine in an enclosed space can cause CO2 poisoning. Household appliances should be well serviced and used safely, and they would only emit small amounts of CO2 gas. Using old appliances and not servicing them frequently leads to a higher risk of CO2 emission. So always buy your new stuff. Keep things in check. Some other causes could be smoking cigarettes causes blood levels of CO2 to rise. You've got leaving your car in a closed garage. You've got burning charcoal produces it. Blocked flues in your chimney because it's not ventilating properly. Flumes, products that contain methylate chloride should be handled with complete and utter care, because methylate chloride turns into CO2 when it's actually breathed in as well. So it's a bit wordy there, but some things to also keep in mind. It's not just appliances, can also be chemicals around the home as well. Audible and visual pareidolia. Woohoo! My favorite. I finally have a drunk octopus in my bathroom when I moved into this place. I always wanted one of those hooks because I remembered this particular picture. So drunk octopus wants to fight. Clearly it's not. Of course, there's Please Help three of these little babies trapped in her knees. As you can see, that looks like she's got babies stuck in her knees. And of course, no wonder children have problems with eating vegetables if they look like that. So of course, we can see faces and shapes in there that are familiar to us in these particular photos, but clearly we know that there are people or drunk octopuses stuck to my bathroom back door. It's our minds making something familiar. So visually, that's what it is. Visual pareidolia. We see faces more than anything we do see in our life, and to see a face is a way to be able to recognize, to keep yourself out of trouble. A familiar face, an unfamiliar face may mean that you may be in trouble. So that's why it's very inherent in our brain that we're actually going to seek this out, even in today's day and age. So paranormal, well, how does it affect paranormal investigating? My gosh, it's one of my veins of it's up there with orbs. I'm telling you, it's up there with orbs. Paranormal investigations generally occur at nighttime when our eyes are already compromised due to the lack of light. So we're already more susceptible to making sense of what we are trying to see. But generally for investigators, these faces appear to be more of ghosts and demonic entities and less likely to be of Jesus. Does anyone remember Jesus in the toast? Now, how do you know if you've captured a face or not in a photo or in a shot? One good practice is to get into taking a series of photos at the same time, like say, for instance, 6 shots in a few seconds. That way, if the anomaly is appearing in all photos, then it's a good chance it's pareidolia. Audible pareidolia. So it's not just visual, we have to deal with the audible part of it as well. Audible pareidolia is when we hear sounds and our brains try to make sense of it. Voices are the most common sound we hear, followed by music. So again, we are already predisposed to hearing voices in the slightest of sounds without anything having been said, living or dead. So even if it's suggested that voices can be heard in a location, this alone is enough for our brains to find the closest match to a recognized pattern. So how do we detect it? Well, if you can think you've captured, recorded a voice, an audio recording, say, for instance, don't tell anyone what you think it was at the time, and have somebody else listen to it and see if they think what the sound is saying. Just go, I just recorded something, I'm not sure what it is. Or can you hear something? That's even a more general, bland question. That's less leading as well. And also being aware of your biases and your beliefs. Like, it sounds like a lady saying, I'm here, and yet there was a girl that was meant to be lost in this particular area. So be wary of where your mind is at when you are reviewing anything that you've recorded. And that is it, lovely people. That's the information there. If you want to find out a bit more about me, I know there's a lot of information in this particular session, but yes, very, very vital. I think every investigator should know all the plausible explanations for possible paranormal phenomena. Thank you very much. Well, CJ, you can unmute yourself, mate.
Sorry. Thank you, Beth. And what I would like to do now, if it's possible, is have a few questions for Beth before we move on to Peter McHugh. So, do we have any